All right, good morning and welcome to Movement and Meditation with Beacon Dance, and my name is Patton White and I am the Artistic and Administrative Director of Beacon Dance, coming from the Beacon Studio in the Capitol View neighborhood of Southwest Atlanta. And this morning we are going to be continuing the work that we were doing last week, which was some of our developmental movement patterns. And with the work that we're going to be doing today, we're going to be using some inspirational ideas and themes that came up at our story circle last Wednesday when we were sharing stories about feeling out of balance or off balance. And so we'll play with some of those qualitative states as we also just play with some of these automatic reflexes that as young people we go through a pattern of developing these reflexes and responses to the stimulation that we are receiving in our infancy. And so we're just going to go ahead and jump right in, and I'm going to do most of what I'm going to be doing today standing. Sometimes I'm seated, sometimes I'm standing, but today I'm choosing to be standing the whole time. So please feel free to adapt this however you need to if you are choosing to be seated through this work today. And we're going to jump right in with just this idea of working with a shifting floor. And so if you're seated, you're going to find yourself responding with the sits bones in your seat, but feeling as if the surface of the floor is shifting in some way, and how that causes the rest of the body to respond. The story that this image came from was one of a fun house, and there were these two belts going in opposing directions, but also there are other places that you might have encountered in a fun house where the floor itself may be shifting in its entirety. So as we feel this shifting floor, it's also allowing with our upper spine, with the rib cage, and with the head itself to just be doing these tiny little movements in response to what's happening with the shifting of the floor. And the floor shifting can be slow, and how that causes the body to respond to that idea of the shifting surface that we find ourselves on. It can be abrupt and happen with little pauses in between. And how does that cause the rest of your upper spine, or even the lower part of the spine, how does that cause it to respond? That feeling of the shifting floor. And how I was starting off was in this sort of slow, continuous shifting. That idea of the forward and the backwards, which is bringing into play our homolateral movements. So same side, if we divide the body down the center, right half, left half, that one side moves and then the other side moves. Homolateral movement, body halves. Let's see what happens if not only is the shifting floor shifting in this plane, but also shifting directionally. So we slowly begin to allow ourselves to see different places in the room that we happen to be in. What are we noticing in our space as we allow the shifting floor, the shifting underlying base of support to move us? All right, now we're going to move into this idea. The image we're working with is eye-opening. So what is some sort of realization that you're coming into? And I'm going to allow this eye-opening to resonate out from my navel, from my belly button. And with this idea of opening the entire upper half of the body as if it's the eyelid, and then closing it back down. So now we're in our homologous movement, which is top half or bottom half. In this case, I'm moving my torso in relation to the base of my limbs, my legs. But if I was in connection with the floor, with my torso itself, my legs themselves would be moving in that homologous way. So this is a type of homologous movement where we are using both limbs to lever the torso against. Levering. So that takes us into our bones, our skeletal system, and how the joint here in the hip socket is allowing the levering. The muscles on either side of the legs are stretching or flexing. Let's go ahead and add, so we're adding top half and bottom half into a pump action. This is one of our Tai Chi movements, and as I'm doing this, I'm aware of this area underneath my armpits, the latissimus dorsi muscles, and I'm also allowing the spine to release as I release forward. So we go from what was initially a fairly simple movement, the levering or folding in hip sockets, and then adding the upper limbs as well as the upper spine in this action. And let's see what happens if we shift direction. Feeling that release in the upper spine. Let's release or change direction again. One more, and last time, shifting now to our fourth direction. And let's come back to the center, and then just take a moment, because we were allowing the head freedom of movement and the riding reaction, bringing the head back up to finding the balance on top of the spine itself. Let's take a moment to just allow the inner ear to adjust as well. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to leaning. So feeling the sense of leaning on something, what is supporting that lean, taking ourselves slightly off center. Imagining a fence post that you might be leaning on. And then juxtaposed with the leaning is coming back to our center and not leaning. So finding that freedom of that balance, that perfectly balanced place where your center of gravity is clearly working as efficiently and with as little effort. And then lean again. In this case, I'm going to turn to the side so that you can see I'm really leaning forward. I'm going to go ahead and take that foot forward, and now I'm leaning on that foot. So our leaning, we can start to exaggerate by taking our feet away from that center place. And as we continue this, let's also pay attention to what brings us back into that center point. We lean, we come to the center, or not leaning. We lean, and we don't lean. Let's see what we can do with the upper body. So, dividing it at the waist, leaning with the upper spine, coming back up. Leaning with the upper spine and coming back to center. And let's continue to shift both directions, facings, allowing ourselves, as we do these shapings, to perhaps work with the image of what is it that you're leaning on, or who might you be leaning on? Who have you leaned on in your past? Who has maybe leaned on you? And let's come back to the center and move on to our next theme or idea, out of place. This is going to take us a little bit through space. So we're going to be utilizing some locomotion. And in this case, I'm just walking or wandering through space. If you're seated, we can maybe find ways to change your orientation in space from one facing to a different one. If you're standing and choosing to walk, feeling out of place, you arrive, and just as soon as you arrive, you realize that's really not where I want to be. I don't feel comfortable being in that place. We can also allow the upper body to start reflecting this idea of feeling out of place. How long do we hold? How long do we stay in this state of feeling out of place before we want to resolve it for ourselves, before we want to react or respond? What is it that is causing you to feel out of place? As we continue, how can we begin to find a place to actually feel in place or feel welcomed? What does that shaping look like? Where is our center of gravity? Where are we in terms of our awareness between one half of the body, whether we're aware on our right side, left side, or top half, bottom half? Do we seek symmetry? Do we feel more comfortable in symmetry? Or do we feel more in place with asymmetry? It's one of those things that each one of us is going to be answering for ourselves. What feels right? What feels comfortable? What makes you feel like you're in the right place at the right time? Is it not just shaping, but also timing? Is feeling out of place because of often I know that I feel very out of place when I feel rushed. I feel much more in place when I feel like I'm part of a slower sense of time, more expansive sense of place or space. I also feel out of place if I'm very confined in some way. This does not feel like I am in place. The more confined for me, the more out of place I feel. The more expansive that I can be, shaping wise, moving through space. And qualitatively, abruptness also makes me feel out of place. Of very bound movement is where that's not my comfort zone. My comfort zone is in releasing, free-flowing, fluid-like. I feel much more in place, being attuned to my fluids. All right, let's move into our next theme or idea, which is disoriented, which is a little bit different than out of place. There's certainly a disorientation sensibility of the out of place thing. But with disorientation, how is that different for you? Disoriented. We may be seeking to find something that's familiar, a sort of a pattern, a shaping that for some reason may have a familiarity to it, but yet it's a little bit different, and so it's disorienting. What happens when we try to shift our balance to just one hip if you're seated, or one leg if you're standing? Often disorientation can happen when we find our torso off the vertical plane, because so much of our existence is about being in this vertical place up here where we have developed to. When we begin to shift into the horizontal or diagonal realm, that becomes a little disorienting. Another way we can kind of find disorientation is this exercise that I learned several years ago. But it's about starting a movement, and before you have even gotten it into motion, you're already trying to do a different movement. And this disorientation of trying to stop what has been a very familiar pattern for you, whatever that might be, and to disrupt it even before it really starts. And this begins to take a very minimal, and the more authentic you can be with it, the more it becomes this thing where even before you've started the gesture or the movement itself, you're already shifting and changing into something else. And so the outward appearance of it, you may not even see a whole lot, but all of this that's happening within my torso, within the beginnings of my limbs, it's about trying to start something and then stopping even before before the movement itself has arrived. And if we play with speed with this, that's where we can really become disoriented. All right, enough disorientation. Let's move on to invisible. Feeling invisible. What is your response to feeling invisible? Is it about shaping? Trying to become more visible by increasing your size? Or is it about dynamics? Which in this case is both effort and timing. So energy and timing. Feeling invisible and trying to somehow feel visible. What brings you into visibility? It's about eye contact. Finding visibility. Is it about clearing away for yourself how you may feel unclear about something for yourself? All right, let's move on to our last idea, and that is burnout. What does burnout shaping look like? I believe you can hear the rain falling on the ceiling here. Let's let the rain wash this feeling of burnout away. Feeling the rain falling on the top of your head, on your face, on your shoulders, on the arms, the torso, washing away all of that sense of burnout. Smelling the scent of the rain. Feeling the healing properties that rain brings. Letting your mind wander, remembering past rainstorms. Feeling the embrace of the fluid. Cleansing. And we're going to bring our session to a close today. Thank you so much for being with me, for letting this rain wash away all that sense of burnout, of all of these different ways that we've been experiencing and feeling disorientation, out of place, feeling invisible. Let the rain wash it away. And in our story circle on Wednesday, we're going to be sharing a story about the time when you felt pushed by somebody. The time that you felt pushed by somebody or something. That physical pushing. And with that, we are done for today. Have a wonderful rest of your day today, and I hope to see you on Wednesday for our story circle. Bye-bye.